just getting there, Dick. Certainly. The meeting is being recorded by the recording clerk via Zoom in the event that the connection is lost at any time during the meeting, and a device is being used by the recording clerk for the purpose of taking minutes. Is there anyone else present who wishes to record the meeting in addition to Mr. Gant? Okay, hearing none. While we are conducting town business using remote participation via Zoom, we ask that those of you not recognized by the chair or otherwise engaged in the discussion of the moment to please mute your microphone to avoid any interruptions outside the conversation. Thank you. Minutes. So we have minutes from July 23rd, 2020. So I will make a motion to approve the minutes of Select Board work session held on Thursday, July 23rd, 2020.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the minutes? Okay, hearing none, we'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Gant?
Aye.
Mr. Hook?
Aye.
Ms. Bermudez is an aye, so the minutes pass unanimously. The Traffic Advisory Committee. Kevin, should I turn this over to you to start or to the police chief?
Sure, I'll frame it. And I just want to acknowledge Chairman Spencer is on the call. Last meeting we had some conversation around the Traffic Advisory Committee, which Chief Hubby, Superintendent Wilds, myself, and others have actively looked at trying to enhance what already exists when it comes to reviewing different types of traffic treatments in town. And the Traffic Advisory Committee, the second draft was sent and discussed at the last meeting, last work session. Deadline was Monday of this week for any additional comments back on that. We did receive comments from Mr. Gant and Chairman Spencer, which have been incorporated into the draft that was posted, I believe, on board docs. And so the latest version that's in front of you has the markups and feedback from you folks for your review. Chief, I don't know if you want to add anything in addition to that.
I know that when I reviewed that, it really didn't change the spirit of it. So I'm in support of all the amendments made to it. I really appreciate the comments from the select board members. I had an opportunity to meet with Mr. Gant for about an hour, and I really appreciate his input and thoughtfulness, and Mr. Spencer and your comments, and the whole support of the board. So I think we're getting closer to a better document, and I appreciate all the work of the chairman and all other select board members. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy with the joint, the melding of the edits and so on. I think is good, and I appreciate having learned that Dick, you and I had. I guess about all of our comments were overlapping, so that was good.
Good.
Lenny, you're running this, or should I?
I'll turn it over to you, John. We're ready for the motion.
I apologize. I was having trouble. I was using the wrong code to get in, and so I finally figured it out. So on this, the question is, I should probably let you get through this one. Are there any questions about this? I think we're probably going to just need a motion if there are not, or at least in any case, we'll want a motion and then any further discussion. Perhaps have a motion to start, please.
A motion to approve the charge of the Traffic Advisory Committee dated 9/24/2020.
Second.
Or a second.
Second.
I have a second. Any further comments or discussion? Hearing none, I will first thank the board for their efforts on this, and we'll take a roll call vote. And I will start. Mr. Gant.
Aye.
Ms. Bermudez.
Aye.
Mr. Hook on the road.
Aye.
Mr. Jackson.
Aye.
Mr. Spencer. Aye. It passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And Chief, I hope that this provides the what you need going forward and supports an improvement in our ability to both make better decisions and engage the public. So thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah, in reference to this, and while the chief is still on, because there was some discussion of this, that we probably need to think about providing some professional services dollars for traffic studies. When we want something that's needs to be thought through, the advisory committee can come through with some things, but some of the others, they may say, this is a time for something more holistic to be viewed by a traffic engineer, which means that we would go out to bid. Perhaps we'd even have a retainer with someone that could help us with these sorts of things. Just as a contrast, the planning board or ZBA at times does want to do traffic studies as part of a project, but those things are typically funded through the committee itself, with the applicant paying for the engineering services that go with it. So we have experience with using traffic engineers for various studies like that. But I think in this case, we should recognize that having put this committee together, we may have a responsibility, or we do have a responsibility, to support them in some cases with professional services.
Excellent. I appreciate that, Dick. I can see that the Traffic Advisory Committee may help in making the decision when outside support expertise is required. So I thank you on that. What I'd like to do now is move on to the Economic and Community Development Committee. Lynn, thank you for handing the meeting to you. I would like to hand this back to you as first, just reminding folks that one of the real evolutions in our collective thinking is that a key component to a path to thoughtful and effective revitalization of downtown includes leadership by the town, not in everything, not defining and doing it just our way, but in leading the process and providing a way for both citizens to have input and for those professionals on the town staff to be able to reach out appropriately to all the state agencies and potential investors and so on and so forth. And to this end, we are creating a selectmen's committee. This is, as has been pointed out before, and I'm saying this for those who are listening to the recording of this meeting, that the goal is to have this be very open and transparent. As Mr. Gant has suggested, it explicitly states that we are bound by open meeting laws in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and that all meetings will be public. They'll be virtual, but they'll be public for the foreseeable future. And that the goal is to create a mechanism to continue to evolve our plans, thoughts, and progress in working downtown. To that end, the decision was made to have a select board person be the leader of this. The main reason being that it's important for outside state agencies to understand that the top elected officials of the town are indeed behind this. They sort of look to see that as a first litmus test of whether there is town support and town alignment. So having said that, Lynn is the person who's been very involved in this from the very beginning and so on. And so Lynn, I'm going to pass it off to you for this item on the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the name of this committee that John was just talking about is the Economic and Community Development Committee, also known, after a lot of work, Kevin, I've gotten this down, ECDC. That's the acronym for it. So at the last meeting, we approved the charter for the ECDC. And today I'd like to see if we can reach consensus on the community members that will be participating on that committee. So a list of the people who have expressed interest in being on the ECDC are up on board docs, along with a few notes about their backgrounds and skills. But before we get into discussing the people, though, I'd like to make a motion to modify the charter, specifically the composition of the committee.
Good.
So due to the great interest that we received from residents to participate on the ECDC and our desire to keep the group at a manageable size, Kevin, John, and I talked and would like to propose reducing the number of select board members that are on the ECDC by one and opening that position up to a member of the community. In this way, we can help maximize involvement by the community and input from residents and businesses. So I'll make the motion and then we can have discussion. So motion to modify the charter of the ECDC, specifically the composition of the committee, to decrease the number of select board members by 1 for a new total of 1 select board member, and increase the number of community members by 1 for a new total of 5 to 7 members.
Second, yeah.
Okay, any questions or comments on the board about this move?
I just wondered about the 5 to 7. We had
We had 4 to 6 previously.
I think the official one that we voted for, though, was for 7.
Was it 7 or not 7? It was either 4 to 6 or 6, but I thought it was 4 to 6. Deb, do you remember?
I think I tried to make the motion of 5 to 7, and
it was 4 to 6 is what was
7. But go ahead. I'll go to what Deb says.
It was 4 to 6. That's what was voted on.
So I'm looking to just increase that 1. So instead of it being 4 to 6, which is what we voted on, just up that to 5 to 7. And in this case, we really are looking at putting 7 on. We just had that range in case we didn't have enough people come forward. So the net of it is 1 fewer select board member and give that slot to someone in the community.
I just want to say,
I'll tell you what I thought you were going to do. I thought the amendment would be to change the composition to 9 and to change the number of residents from 4 to 6. I was just
that's basically what I am doing, Dick.
About it, but I'm with you.
So the number on the board or the committee would be 9, with Kevin, myself, and then 7 community members.
I just want to say I support this. I was likely to be, since I've been involved in this so deeply, one of the select board members. But first of all, I have great confidence that 1 select board member can do the leading necessary. And second of all, it is the duty of this board to report, of this committee, to report to the board. So no secrets. They don't have any executive action authority or anything like that. We will end up dealing as a full board on any matters that require votes and so on. And I think this actually better represents our commitment to making sure this is a community effort. So, Dick, it was some of the comments you made that made it clearer to me that this was a positive move.
Any other questions or thoughts before we vote? No? Okay. Mr. Chair, do you want to take a roll call?
Sure. I'll take a roll call on the motion to
as stated.
As stated, changing the membership for the ECDC charter. I'll start with Mr. Gant.
Aye.
Ms. Bermudez.
Aye.
Mr. Hook.
Aye.
Mr. Jackson. Mr. Spencer, aye. It passes unanimously.
Great, thank you. So just a quick review before we discuss the actual EDCDC members. At our last meeting, we asked board members to reach out to the community and to assess any interest that might be there in participating, and then to provide Kevin and myself with those recommendations. So thank you, everyone, for the names that you sent over. We have a really great list of strong people. We also had other people who were interested in participating, but unfortunately, their schedules were very busy at this point in time so that they couldn't join us. But I was very pleased with the number of people who are interested in helping us move forward these initiatives. So we came up with a recommendation. So in addition to the people being excited and having the time and commitment to be part of the committee, we were looking at 3 things: skill sets, previous experience either from work or in town, and their sphere of influence. One of the things that was very important was to make sure that we had enough pockets of the town represented. And so we were very excited about that because we have a good wide selection. So we have 7 positions to fill. And after talking with the board members about their candidates, Kevin and then talking with the candidates, I'd recommend that we nominate the first 7 people that are listed on the document on board docs. The reason I'm recommending the first 7 is that it gives us representation with the new nonprofit, former members of the Main Street Foundation, people who have held various roles throughout town to understand the workings of those operations. We have downtown property owners, Route 1 property owner, and we have some new faces from the community with children in the school system and people who are currently involved in moving initiatives forward. So I think it's a great cross-section. So at this point, I would just open it up to get any comments or feedback from each of the board members.
I'm just going to say I don't see this list. On board docs, I see the charter. I don't see people. Anyway.
Deb, you had put it up, right?
It's under the admin section. Just scroll down.
Scroll down to administrative
You got to scroll
content.
down.
Content.
All right.
Do you see it, Marshall?
I don't, but I'll figure it out.
I've got the same problem, but I'm looking.
Are you logged in or just as a public?
No, I'm logged in.
As long as you're authenticated, you should be able to see it.
Yeah, Dick makes a good point. You have to be logged in as a member with your password, or it will not show.
Yeah, it's coming up under my administrative content, not under public content.
I'm gonna re-log
Lynn,
in.
while we're trying to get to that, would you just read the names, or I'll be glad to read the
Can you
names.
share
of the 7?
screen, Lynn, and talk? How about that? Or do you want me to share screen?
Let's see if I
can share screen if you
I have
want.
the names here if you want me. I'll read them.
we can read the 7. I'm happy to read the 7. So it's Sarah Guido, who is the chair of the nonprofit TCP, the Topsfield Community Partnership. Janet Metz, who is a former member of the Mainstream Foundation. She's also a former select woman, library board, and park and cemetery board member. Zilly Boujou, who is a downtown property owner and a business owner, and she's on the Masco School Board. Rich Crossan, who is a Route 1 business owner. And just as an aside, he's a West Point grad. He's a Topsfield resident. Rosie DeCipio, she's a real estate agent. She has children in the school system. She's also very strong social media skills. She launched a new Facebook parent group, and she's active in the community. Kim Philpott, who is also a former member of the Main Street Foundation with strong graphic design, PR, and advertising skills. And Kim Daly, who is a nurse. She was a former president of Hood Pond and Playground Committee, and she's currently working on Pump the Park Committee, and she has children in the school system. So those are the 7 that I would put forward to recommend.
I move that we approve the slate of 7 as proposed by the vice chair.
Would you consider, I'll second that.
Thank you.
Any discussion?
Would you consider adding an alternate in the event that somebody of those 7 finds that they are unable to continue on to for whatever reasons, to have an alternate that we would all appoint as the alternate, especially since we have 8 here, we could easily find an alternate.
Can I suggest that I think it's a good idea, Dick, but rather than appoint them and have them kind of sit on their hands, whether it would be 3 months from now or next year when we might be reviewing all of these, that at any point the committee can come and request that we add someone. They may have a suggestion. They may ask us for suggestions. I'm a little disinclined to have somebody who's sitting out there kind of in hyperspace as an alternate. Should they go to the meeting? Should they not? Do they have to stay? It's like an alternate jury. You don't know whether you're going to do anything or not. And I think as a respect for people's time that maybe we recognize that could happen, but not ask for people to make a commitment at this time. Just my thought.
Just as an aside, anyone that oh, sorry, Dick, go ahead.
I just thought since the person is on, is already committed to it, we certainly do alternates. We've done that in the past. We certainly have alternates on planning board and on the ZBA. But one of the advantages of the alternate is they're kind of known that they might be called upon, and they might take more responsibility to stay interested, so that they are in a better position to step in if necessary. But I think it's go ahead. That's my thought. I think it's worth it, but go ahead.
I was just going to say that for the people that were not recommended right now, as well as others that had tight time commitments, I did share with them that it's open meetings. They're able to come to any and all meetings and provide feedback or even provide offline. So if they have an interest, I'm sure that they would tune in and stay up to date on what the committee is working on. And it may, once we get into things too, it may surface that some people who weren't interested before become interested, and people who were interested are not, depending on the direction that some of the initiatives take.
Okay.
So you're leading this, Lynn. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. So we have a first and a second. Any other discussion?
Sounds like a good group to me. Nice job.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, that was definitely a team effort. These names came from everybody. It was a great cross section. So if we could take a roll call vote then, Mr. Chair?
Yes, I'll take a roll call vote on the motion on the table regarding membership. I'll start. Mr. Gant.
Aye.
Mr. Jackson.
Aye.
Mr. Hook.
Aye.
Ms. Bermudez.
Aye.
Mr. Spencer. Aye. Passes unanimously. And Lynn, I really want to thank you for what I know were tremendous number of calls and talking with people and explaining things. This is a real service to get us started, and very exciting that it's going to get underway. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Having dispensed with that, we'll now go on to budget capital warrant preparation timeline. And I will turn this over to Town Administrator Kevin. And his picture disappeared and the name appeared.
Well, sorry about that, everybody.
That's all right.
Timing in life is everything. You're on, Kev. Lights go off. So as I'm still coming up on 1 year now in the position here as the town administrator in Topsfield, which has been incredible, and still taking first steps in some areas. One of them was in regards to the budget preparation schedule. There was one that was distributed last year. I think it was a little later in the calendar year when it was distributed, but there are a number of things that we want to make sure we incorporate early in the process, and that we incorporate in a comprehensive schedule to keep our tasks in line. And so working with our town accountant, Catherine Gabriel, Debbie, and some others, clerk's office, Donna, Rich, we put together, in this case, a draft. Feel very confident with it, but before we distribute it and make it an official document that we'll use as our guidance throughout the process over the next handful of months, did want a chance to receive any feedback from the board, any questions, comments, thoughts, and be able to again answer any questions you might have. I did take some liberties in a couple of areas. So any guidance from the board as well regarding, for instance, town meeting warrant opening dates and closing dates. Those were dates I put in there that mirrored what we did last year, but just with slight variations based on the new calendar, obviously. But tried to keep that consistent. If there's a desire to do something different, we can now, or when the time comes, we can obviously audible then as well and make changes to the schedule. This is a guide. It will try to keep to it to stay on task so that we don't miss any deadlines. But as we learned last year, there's always things that happen that are unexpected. And there is some flexibility, obviously, as we move through this schedule at the end of the day as well. So I'll stop talking, but I just, like I said, I appreciate the opportunity to share this with you folks before in the work session, before it gets distributed. My goal is to actually send this out Monday to our team, to the department heads, and as well as with some capital information about what we're planning to do from capital expectations, which is typically and will continue to be sort of the first step in our budget, capital, and warrant preparation.
Kevin, small point, just on the town meeting warrant open and close dates. The close dates just need to be consistent. In the first line, it says they close on 1/29, but then a little bit further down, it says town meeting warrant closes on 1/22.
Thank you for that. That was in the notes on the first line under January. It says 29. Change that to 22 unless there's to be consistent. Yep. Thank you for that.
So you're going to set it to the 29th, correct?
The hope, so based on
time, 4 weeks is a good amount of time for it to be open.
Sure. So I backed into that 22nd day based on the work session, which is on that Thursday. And one of the things I planned to, my hope would be at that work session to review the level 1 budget and review the articles submitted during the open period. So we could extend that to Monday. That gives people more time, or Tuesday even. I want to make sure I have the material though to you on Thursday so you can have a couple of days to review it prior to our work session. So that's how I sort of backed into that date of the 22nd, but I'm open to, any desire that the board has to make any modifications or changes on that.
Can I offer a thought on this? I'm sort of asking for the board's sense on this. Dick, you have more familiarity with this than certainly I do, and probably anybody else on the board here. There's quite a possibility that we're going to be swimming around in a fog a little bit because the state is going to be changing what they forecast they'll be able to give us. We're going to be in a different situation. Not everyone may agree with me. I tend to believe that we're going to have to go through the throes of a second wave on the pandemic, and we may be in the throes of it at that time. We don't know. I'm wondering if the suggestion to go to the 28th, take that extra week, would be worthwhile, because we may need to put a work session or two, extra one in between there to work some issues out. I don't know what others think of that.
So Kevin, John, what are you proposing? Right now it's listed as 1/5 until 1/29.
Well, I was looking, it is 1/29. I've got
1/22, sorry.
The 1/22.
Is there an updated version, Kevin?
No, so the 1/29 was what was left over from the version I was working off of. That was an error. The 22nd is the actual date. The dates on the left are accurate. The description that had the 29 is not. So again, the purpose of putting the 22nd, and this is just my thought process, was to the chairman's point, was to time it with the work session in that month, knowing that we might have another one. We can anticipate that now, and I can change that date. We could do it to the 28th and then have a work session maybe on February 3rd to discuss it if you want.
Okay, I'm sorry. I must have printed off an older version then. I would say give as much time to folks. I would let it go to the 28th. And I think, if we get one additional request that comes in after we've met in work session, or that Kevin brings in the day of the work session, we would have had time to review everything else. So one more would not be a big deal to have us review right at the time of the meeting.
Agreed.
Perfect. So I will then make an adjustment. That line, the third line up in January that says 1/22/21 will read 1/28/21. Friday will be changed with Thursday. And then I will take out in the next line for the work session, review articles submitted during open period. And what I'll do is I will create a work session for maybe that Thursday,
I'm sorry, maybe it wasn't clear. I was proposing sticking with that, Kevin, that just what you have, the 1/28 work session. If for some reason you would have gotten us the warrants sooner and we would have had time to review, but if something comes in that day when we're meeting, which is the last day it's open, just bring it in and we can take a look at it. That way nothing else on the schedule has to change.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm with you. If the board's comfortable with that works just fine.
That's fine with me too. I just want to recognize that I think we may have a budgeting process in an environment that is quite different, that will be affecting us. And the reality is we may need to spend more time trying to figure it out than kind of following the pattern that we've done in the past. But I'm willing, recognizing that we can always flex if we need to. And as sometimes happens, we have to throw extra work sessions in to do what needs to be done. I'm okay with that. I just wanted to recognize that I think this year is going to feel quite a bit different than past years.
First, I'd like to say nice job, Kevin, on getting this thing so that the dates are early in the cycle. Now, granted, from what John just said, that may be an additional challenge, but thank you for getting this schedule with such dates in it. That's the way it should be. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Gann.
It's great. And Kevin, the only other thing that I saw was we had a warrant version 1 and a warrant version 3. And I didn't know if there was a warrant version 2 somewhere in there that was coming out. It could be that it was on March 11th, the work session, but there was nothing after that. So maybe that's when we were getting or reviewing version 2.
Let's see. Right. So that first one on the 18th, I believe that will give us a couple of weeks to iron out and get the language to you folks. Then the hope would be to receive feedback like we did last year between the meetings after discussion that I can incorporate for the next work session. So I will change that to version 2 on the 3/16 date. Although, I think actually...
it could be that version 2 is on March 11th because we have a work session then, and we would have gotten you comments back from February 18th.
Let me, I'll clean that up. I'll get some clarity on that.
Okay, thanks.
Good calls, then.
Thank you for that, though, Vice Chair. It's a good catch.
No problem.
On November 12th, it's a Thursday, we have work session review version 1 capital plan. And then it goes on, and also warrant articles from the Board of Selectmen. I believe the capital plan, at that point, it's something that you've been through. You've got a pretty good idea of what you want from the capital plan. I think that the citizens in general are quite interested in that. Now, they can, of course, come to a work session meeting, but I think it's a most appropriate thing to be in front of a Monday, regular scheduled meeting to go through that capital plan. That gives people a first idea of where we think we're going to be asking for capital money.
I think Dick's spot on that.
So maybe that's maybe a January. Let me see if I can find the.
Yeah, you had January 21st as an open house for the Capitol.
Yep. So the hope was, because the Capitol is still flexible. I mean, to a certain degree, right? Until we get, like last year, we had the Capitol that we went through, we approved, and then we ended up paring some of that back closer towards the March, April time period, probably.
Once we got into the COVID, we were concerned about having cash into this year, and so we made some changes, right?
There's a very good chance we might be in the similar position. So, absolutely, Mr. Gant and Mr. Chairman, I mean, we can put in maybe in either in the January, I'm looking at the schedule right now, so we have a regular meeting December 7th. If we wanted to take that up, the Capitol at the regular meeting, I'll add that to the schedule.
I think it's a good idea.
Okay. I'm sure Debbie's making a note of that for the agenda.
So we had 2 meetings to go through that capital plan. The second one was on December 17th. Do you want to do the readout at our board meeting after we've had 2 meetings to discuss capital? Because prior to that, we just had 1.
If you want, we could remove that out of the work session on the 17th if we're taking it up on the 7th.
I just don't remember how many meetings we had to review the capital items. As I remember it, it was like 3 at least.
Yeah, I came in at the very last meeting. I think my second day on the job was Robin gave her final presentation of
Yeah.
at the time.
So
So that was right around this time.
On the 17th, that could be a review of something that we talked about and worked on the 7th of December. In other words, a week and a half before. So it seems to me that that's an appropriate thing. Although I would change the word from final capital plan because the final is on the 7th of January. I think that's version 2. In other words, you take all of that input that we're talking about on the 7th, review. If there's any changes that come through at that meeting, that Monday meeting, then you have a week and a half to resolve things and come up with a version 2 of the capital plan. And then if there's any changes to that, whatever the case may be, by the 7th of January, you have what you want, which is a final plan.
Sounds great.
Yep. I like that.
So I'll add, so just for the purposes of keeping score, I'll add on this, it's already a meeting that we're going to have on the 7th of December, but I'll add that to this schedule with the note review capital. And then I will take out on 12/17 the word final before the word capital.
On 12/17, there's another line item there, which is to provide the citizens with guidelines for submitting petitions for town meeting. That's fine, but do you anticipate any real changes from what we've done in the past? Perhaps you're just trying to get
it's a reminder.
Specific guidelines. Is that what it is?
It's just so I'll lean on the town clerk and her to support on this one, obviously, but the plan would be to ensure that the proper notifications put in the proper place so that people have access to it readily.
Okay. Yeah. You don't anticipate any great changes. There shouldn't be. This pretty much state law. So, okay.
It's the instructions. Yeah, basically.
It's a good review
on
for
the
people
22nd.
in the town or who haven't expressed an interest before in participating. So a lot of people, it might be their first time hearing it. So
Yeah. Okay. And on December 22nd, it's submittal for free cash certification. Is that like the last date? I thought usually we get that done sooner than the December 22nd. That's the only thing that sounded late in the cycle to me.
Yeah, it's a target date. I worked with Catherine Gabriel on understanding what's a realistic date that we will be able to have that number and the certification for it. With the CARES Act and some other items, there's a pretty heavy toll right now, as well as closing out the 20 books with that department.
Oh, yes.
And so this is to make sure we do it right and that we have enough time to do it right. So that was the date.
We had the free cash issue that we're still using free cash from last year. It hasn't closed out. Okay, I got it. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
On January 21st, what's this level 1 budget placeholder? What's placeholder refer to?
So we actually only have one work session during the month of January currently on the books, and that is the one on the 14th. So I'm tentatively suggesting at this point that we'll likely have multiple meetings to discuss the budget that month. And so that's like last year
an additional meeting is what you're saying.
That is not technically on the books yet, but one that I'm hoping we can have. And that my intent during that period in January is to do something similar to what we did last year, where the department heads will become available to meet at these work sessions and answer directly any questions that the select board might have regarding their budgets.
As far as the warrant goes, we would typically have a whole bunch of items that are part of the recommendation for the warrant. We've closed it so that theoretically there's no additional items in the warrant. But from that point on, it's up to the board then to decide what we do or don't want in the warrant. How did you see that progressing? Because in other words, it's as it has been in the past. We'll go through various areas and approve them at various dates as we have meetings to finalize what's in the warrant. There's no difference from what we've done in the past, true?
I will take any and all feedback as we progress on that. But I think last year, once it's closed, the plan will be to provide everybody. We'll review it on the same day it's scheduled to be closed on. And then from there, I think the next time we discuss the warrant articles is on the 18th. So from the 28th to the 28th of January to the 18th of February, I'll be head down with my department heads working on the articles in some language, some very draft language at that point to provide you folks at that version 1 warrant articles work session on the 18th. And then from there, my hope will be is to, on the 11th, we'll probably have some more review on March 11th of the articles. And then that'll probably be the next version that comes out of there, will be distributed a handful of days thereafter, March 16th, to both yourself, to the select board and the FinCom. And then on the 25th, after receiving any other additional edits or comments, a final, I call it final warrant, but a distribution of the warrant at that point on the 25th. The hope then being gives us one last window where if there's any last changes or edits or concerns, something changes, COVID, whatever it might be, that on the 29th Monday, there will be hopefully a joint meeting. And that's why I put placeholder on the 29th, but a joint meeting that will be scheduled for the FinCom and the select board to vote the warrant at that time. And then our deadline statutory deadline for the 2.5 ballot question is 4/2, but we're putting here a target date internally of 4/1, which will then allow us to deliver to the printer on 4/2 that warrant on that Friday. We've found historically that it takes 1 week to receive them, but we try to give ourselves a little extra time, and they ask for it as well, just from a management standpoint of expectations. And so we are looking at the 12th to then pick it up. That's 10 days. And then the warrants will be distributed on the 13th by mail and posted on the website. And on the 19th, constable to post the warrant. And that's a statutory 14 days from then. Yeah. And at that point, next step is town meeting.
So in the schedule here, there are certain dates that are extremely important and aren't going to change. For example, when we're due to have the data about overrides, if any, or any questions, any ballot questions, because the ballots need to be prepared and they need the 35 days. So some of the dates are hard on that. In the case of the March timeframe, though, I think it's important for us to be realistic that the meetings that we have and that the actual dates that we hit on various things may very well be affected by how we're moving along with the warrant. Based on years of experience, that tends to be a flexible area, and we need to be flexible in that.
Yeah.
Can I talk about the budget approach? We have a level 1 budget that is coming out in January. That's the 7th of January. And then there's a level 2 budget, which is decreed as February 4th. Your thoughts on this level 1, level 2, and any other levels? What happens when there are a department that has an interim budget change or a couple of changes within their budget as they're going through that?
So what will happen is I'll just walk through the whole budget process. So we're scheduling meetings myself to meet one-on-one with each department head in October. From the 6th to the 14th of October will be my meetings with department heads. We'll discuss both capital, but we'll also discuss what they feel they need in their budgets or what they're looking for in their budgets, and what also set expectations of what the town, myself, expect out of their budget when they pull it together. We'll then send out the instructions on the budget on
While you're looking at
the 24th of November. The budget packet will go out to department heads. At the same time, we'll ask them to start compiling any list of warrant articles that the departments are interested in as well. So they'll receive we'll have the discussion in October, start thinking about that. They'll work on their capital, and then we'll distribute on the 24th of November. Then they have until let's see exact dates. Well, I'll be meeting with the department heads before they submit it back. That's important to me. So I have the preliminary conversation, and then they have time to work on their budget. Before they submit it to Catherine, we'll go through it. I'll understand if they have things that they're asking for, why they're asking for it. We might make changes before we submit it, or we might just move it forward and let the conversation to develop. One of the things I'm committed to is being very involved in the process as a town administrator, to understand each department and all the nuances within the budget that exist. And so after the 22nd, they'll finish up their budgets. All departments will submit their budget to the town accountant on the 29th. In prior years, they've done two types of submittals. Basically, all departments that report to the town administrator were due one date, and a week later, the boards and commission budgets were due. We're just consolidating it all and putting it on the 29th. Talking with Catherine, there's really not a difference if they submit it during that week. We're consolidating it in one time, so everybody's budgets are due on the 29th. Then Catherine will take that. She'll pull that together for the omnibus, which her and I will go through and make sure everything is how we thought it would be. And if there's anything we need to reconcile it. And then the first level 1 omnibus will be distributed to the select board and the FinCom on the 7th of January. The level 1 represents the department submittals at that point, with TA involvement. The next phase of that, once that's submitted to you folks, is we'll discuss the budgets during the rest of the month of January. And with feedback from myself and from the select board, if there's places as we talk with the department heads, we have conversations about flu clinics last year or dead animal pickup, or whatever it might be, where there might be changes in the budget, understanding the budget. And if there's places we just collectively, we say that and we want to make a change, we'll make those changes. The level 2 omnibus budget represents the town administrator and the select board review and sign off and submittal to the next level of that budget. The third level of that budget's then the FinCom. And so FinCom will then have the budget, and they'll take their process, which is similar to what we'll take, where the department heads will be brought into the FinCom meetings to review the budgets with the FinCom, discuss their line items individually. And then the FinCom will go through their process. As I learned last year, they'll go through the lines and vote any type of changes to the budget that are not within guidelines, up or down. And at that point, we'll have a FinCom, which is the level 3. So level 1 is the department heads working with the town administrator. Level 2 is the select board's review with the town administrator, and level 3 is the FinCom.
Thank you.
I like that, Kevin. Thank you for delineating those. I think it helps us keep it straight.
So one of the things that comes in here is the FinCom providing guidelines. You mentioned later on that they review budgets against their guidelines, but they would typically come up with guidelines and provide them to the department people before the department people attempt to make their budget. So I think it's appropriate to have something, for example, if we want to take the October 26th meeting, says FinCom meeting, and provide guidelines, or at some point, I think you need to work with the FinCom to give you to tell them when you would like them to provide the guidelines, such that when you're working with the departments, they know what their guidelines are from the FinCom.
So I've, as we all know, there's been transition with leadership. John Guido stepped down as the chair, and Che has stepped in the position of chairman. And I've had a couple email exchanges, and we had a pretty lengthy phone conversation, and we talked about their schedule for their meetings. They've only scheduled out through the beginning of November at this point. And so one of the things we talked about, and which I asked for, and which they said they're going to work towards, is they're going to have lengthy discussion on the 6th. I'm presenting to them my financial forecasting for the rest of this year. It's a really tough year to do financial forecasting because of what's been happening. But I'll share with how we've sort of tightened the belt and where we found some savings this year and how we're doing and how we project out as best we can. And Che recognizes the information we'll be giving him is only as good as that moment, and it changes literally 5 minutes later. So we'll do our best to provide some insight there. And then he's asked for a fiscal 22 outlook as well. with the same preface that the information is so unknown at this point. And to the chairman's point, there's so many realities around COVID and the potential for spiking and the impacts financially to that. So I'll be at the FinCom meeting on the 6th. I was asked to be there. Captain
Which
Gabriel will
one?
be there. Her and I. I'm sorry.
Which one? The which?
The 10th, the 10-6. I will be there, and then what I understand is that they'll be coming up with guidelines by the 26th. So when we release our department head packet on the 30th, I'm sorry, not on the 30th. When that goes out on.
In that time frame, that's close enough.
Yeah,
So
it
the point
basically
is
they're
well
going to have
taken.
guidelines, and within a week or so, we'll be sending the whole packet out. I'm just going to plug my camera, my iPad in. It's getting low on battery, so just excuse me for 1 second. I apologize.
Okay.
Kevin, ask Debbie to reach in the drawer, find a few dollars in the back to get you a charging cord for these meetings.
It's really interesting because I go back and forth between my phone, my iPad, and obviously my hard computer here, and I'm just constantly plugging things in these days. It's amazing. A lot of meetings. So
Just
yeah.
to summarize where you were, I think the summary is that you're asking the FinCom to provide guidelines on the 26th of October.
That's their
basically-
target date they gave me, and I asked that would be the date because that would line up well with our schedule.
Great. And typically the select board has looked at the budgets before they actually hit the omnibus. And that is to say in the December timeframe that we would be looking at budgets. It sounds like you're suggesting that we move that out. Well, you've moved a lot of things in. We're going to move that part out to January.
Yeah, and that was in line with how the schedule. Again, it was a different year with the transition of different town administrators, and obviously with COVID. But that gives us enough time because the November, December is going to be a really busy time meeting with department heads and getting information out, getting information in, compiling that. And so the vision is to make sure we can dedicate the right time when we have it towards making sure you folks are comfortable with it. So again, the level one is pre-select board review, and that's known. And so the FinCom will, and the community will have an understanding that is that's just a very preliminary draft, and that there will be edits to it. And the FinCom, I'm sure, will be looking through it and making some notes. But by the time they get the level 2, will be our version, the one that we've submitted with some changes. Some of their notes might change at that point, but it's purposeful, like a step-by-step process, which is what I think is very important to make sure that the select board has the first sort of grab at, or not grab, that's the wrong word, but the first opportunity to make edits to the sorry, got word choice.
In the January
select board will have
we got it.
the select board will have the first opportunity to review it and with the department heads prior to going to the FinCom.
One of the things I think will be more important than perhaps past years is to make clear what assumptions we're working with at what point in time. In other words, back in October, we make an assumption as to what we would expect from state aid, what we'd expect from free cash, et cetera. And the assumptions may not be correct, but at least know what the assumptions were, so that as they change, you know how you can drive that down into the affecting the budget.
Kevin, the fact that we've got this kind of a schedule this early in the process is refreshing. We haven't had that in a number of years, and that's why Gant has lost half of his hair, because he really has a problem with it when it comes in so late. Obviously, you feel a lot more comfortable with this year than you did last year.
I certainly do. It was my timing when I started couldn't have been any better as far as I'm concerned, because as I've said all along, I was able to jump in 2 feet first and get a really good handle on what was going on going through the budget process, but it wasn't too early and it wasn't too late. So this year, this calendar, creating this was my first time doing this with you folks, but October, November, that will be my first time going through this with you folks. So I will absolutely be listening. And if there's a place where I can be better or recommendations along the way, like I said at the top, this is a guide for us. Things will change, I'm sure, through the process. But I certainly want to make sure that we're all comfortable with the schedule. But it's a first crack at it, and I feel comfortable with it. I think working with the team, it's a pretty good schedule. It's a very good schedule, and I think we'll be able to hit our goals and hit our timelines and be able to move this effectively through the process.
Can I go to March 29th? It refers to a final vote by the Select Board and FinCom on the warrant. The FinCom doesn't actually make a vote on the warrant. They have to get their various articles in. They may not have every article with a recommendation, but the final vote for the warrant is by the Select Board. So I would simply take out and the
Catch.
And now I know last year the Chairman Guido and I had, and Chairman Spencer and I had talked a little bit about the timing, because they were trying to schedule their last meeting to vote, and we were scheduling ours. And I was asking the question, who should go first? And if I remember correctly, John Guido asked that we vote on ours, and then they would vote on like that next Monday for theirs, and because they vote as well. It's on the warrant articles, I believe, whether it's favorable action or not.
Yeah, we have to basically finalize our choice of what's going to be in there. After we do that, then the FinCom goes back, looks at the ones we have approved, and votes a recommendation. They vote internally on a recommendation to recommend positive action or recommend no action on each of those, or they basically hold it until later and so on. But in a sense, they have to have the last pass at what's going to be in the what's handed off for the warrant being published. We all know there are sometimes changes occasionally on the floor, but that's the way it's done. And for so many people who get the warrant, knowing to the extent they can what the FinCom is recommending is an essential part of their thinking about how they might want to vote.
I think historically they've been able to vote positive or no action on the warrant articles over many weeks. So it's just at the tail end that they have some outstanding votes that need to be addressed.
It's always a piecemeal project for their approval or non-approval.
If they see a shift after we have done our pieces and so on, we'll probably see it reflected in them saying, we're going to change. We're going to say we can't afford this, and they'll change theirs. But that's all part of the way the sausage is made. And so, Kevin, just know that we vote, and then we kind of take a breath, and then they have another week or two or however long to
day,
essentially. Yeah, they have to be ready to do their final thing for the publication.
So maybe for the wording on that particular item for March 29th, I'll change that to say joint meeting with Select Board and FinCom and final vote by SB.
Good.
Do we need a joint meeting?
It's a placeholder.
Yeah, it's a placeholder. I don't know that we know. Let me put it this way. Our conversation is about whether we're going to do it. I suppose the value of having them there is because they'll hear our rationale and why we're including it. That's probably the most important aspect of that.
So I'll just take the vote part out. I'll just say a joint meeting between the Select Board and the FinCom. And then if we need it, we can use it. If we don't, we won't.
But I think it is good to have a target for when we're going to vote on the town warrant, on the articles in the town warrant. When we vote on town warrant articles, our final vote on town warrant articles should be spelled out there, because that's a key piece. Remember, we went at it. We had some we agreed on. We kind of got as many of them out of the way as we could. And then we kind of got it down to the ones that we really had to work on. What's the deadline for the final time that we have to commit to doing that, so that we leave the FinCom enough time to do their job?
Yeah, I think last year it was down to there being a runner between the two rooms Did you vote? We're about to vote.
That's right.
Okay,
So,
on May 4th at 6 o'clock, there's several things that may go on there. One of them is this final budget transfers, and it's really only the FinComs that's doing the voting on those transfers.
And we listen on that. It's a joint meeting, but it's the final FinCom vote.
They do the final
FinCom vote on the final
transfers. And we may discuss it in there, but they're the ones that are essentially approving them as to what they are going to recommend at town meeting. So there's other things, though, that may go on at that meeting, but that's the main thing. And then lastly, at 7 o'clock, just change that from 2020 to 2021 town meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Gant.
Good catch.
What's that?
That was a good catch.
One thing to think about too is, again, the COVID conversation. It's just worth saying out loud again that the town meeting, and obviously the elections as a result, there could be some changes that happen depending on how things go. Just like last year, we'll be prepared and we'll execute efficiently and effectively to make sure people are safe. If we do need to do it outdoors again, we'll certainly make sure we have that available. However, if we do have to be outdoors again because of COVID and concerns about health, that date would certainly change to a Saturday like we did last year. And the good news is it won't be at the end of June, so hopefully we will not see 90-degree temperatures again.
John or Kevin, do you know, is the FinCom still meeting at 7 o'clock on Mondays, the same time we are? Because that made it a little tough if we wanted to sit in and hear dialogue.
I've talked with both John Guido before he stepped down his chair on this, and he relayed that to their last meeting, that there was a request that we try to have their meetings fall on the other Mondays than of a regular when they're doing every other. And then when they go every week, there might be some, we'll work on seeing if they're willing to do Tuesdays or changing the time, the start time, for example. I think it's really important that the select board, myself, and department heads and others who want to participate in both settings can do so. So working with the chair of the FinCom on that, and so far all the indications are that they're certainly willing to work off of our schedule to determine theirs.
Nothing like being the ones to step up and say, can we do this, as opposed to depending upon being late and asking after the fact. So good work on that, Kevin. I appreciate it very much.
Pleasure.
Anything further on this? This is a great piece of work. I would make one request, Kevin and Debbie. Would you be kind enough when you put these edits in to send it out by part of regular mail, not just board docs for a future meeting, but let's have a last look at this and see. I'd like to treat this as an ongoing work in progress, but it seems to me, from what we know right now, we're sort of at the 99% mark. But let's have a fresh copy. And the last thing I would ask is on the bottom, would you please put a date of this and so on. I don't care whether it's version 1, version 2, but I do care what date. So in this case, I would put down 20-09-24 so that as we file these things, we can keep track of the evolution and so on. That makes sense, Kevin?
Absolutely. We'll make sure we incorporate that.
Well,
we'll get a clean copy out via email.
Yeah, and I think what'll happen is we'll all probably take another look at this, and there may be a tune here or there, but this has been a huge piece right now. So anything further on this at the moment?
You meant in the footnote we're gonna put the date?
I would, in the footer, not the footnote, but in the footer.
Footer, not
footer. I would put the date of when we approved it, and we haven't voted, but we've sort of, the consensus is this is a good working document. With the changes made, it'll have today's date on it. Then if we decide to say, oh, we forgot about this, then we'll put a date on later when that comes. That really helps me rather than version numbers, because I don't know how many version numbers there are. Do I have 3 and it's the last, or do I have 3 and there's a number 4 floating out there? If there's a date, that helps me organize things. And to be quite honest, I organize all my files with a date structure that way so I can keep track of them within the folders they're relevant to.
Maybe this one could have a date sooner than today when it was first created, and then or whenever you update the next one, Kevin, to have a different date so that we can distinguish between today's and the next version, whatever
Sure.
date you want.
We'll put a footer on the version on board docs and replace the board doc one. So there's not confusion. We'll send out the revised one via email with a new date on it. And then any future posting of it will have that consistency.
Then one of the reasons I would like today's date on this is that if for any reason there's any discussion that causes us want to go back and look at the minutes of the meeting or anything, the minutes of meeting are tied to the date of the meeting.
Yeah, no, that's great. As long as there was just a different date that we didn't just incorporate because we discussed it today, to have the update be today's date, that would just be confusing. We didn't have a starting document.
Heretofore on all these kinds of documents, including the many, many budget passes that we're going to have and so on, I'm fairly neutral on whether there's a version number there. I don't use them, but I very much would like to have some kind of indicator in the file title of what the date is that was approved so that we can keep track on that. That's my take. We'll talk about that going forward, but that's more
John,
housekeeping and document management.
I think that's very worthwhile discussion, how we do the documents. But I'd like to continue it now, perhaps a little bit. Let's take the warrant as an example, assuming that we have multiple changes in the warrant. I would see the name, and there's two things: is what's in the document and what the file name is. Hopefully, there's some relationship between the two. But the file name is perhaps the single most important, because when we look for it in the computer, you're looking at a file name. When you're looking at it, you're not looking for what's inside the document. And to have something whereby the name of the document is at the beginning of the file name is very helpful, because then when you do a sort based on name, that particular document and all, quote, versions of it appear. The second piece, so the name is the same, the second piece is the version, and the third piece that can be added is the date of that version. That doesn't have to be there, but it could be added as the date. In all cases, the total number of characters for the name is the same every time it's named, and for the version is the same number of characters. It's V with one or two numbers, dot something, because sometimes you have a sub number of a version. And then if we want to add the date, put the date on. But this is something we should discuss so it's easy for us to find and keep track of multiple versions when we're making a lot of changes.
Dick, could I ask if you would be kind enough to sort of write that down as a proposal and put it together so that we can look at that and just sort of see it written out as kind of, this is how we're going to do our documents.
Excellent.
I think you're spot on with it. If you could do that, and we'll make a short, it's not a vote item, but we'll just all look at it again and say, yeah, this makes sense. So that the nomenclature for documents going forward makes them much easier to sort and find. So I think it's a good point. I don't want to take more time doing the details. I think your suggestion is spot on. And I think I like the idea of the same name length so that you see the version numbers lining up in your index. If you'd be kind enough to give an example and put a little example together and so on, we can look at, then we'll just sort of take a quick look at it in future meeting and say okie dokie.
Yep.
I think it's a great idea. I'd like to move on, and we're going to take the CARES Act funds agenda item. I'm going to put that on Monday for a couple of reasons. One, I don't want this to go on too long, and Monday's agenda is currently pretty thin, so we have space to put it there. This conversation, this is money the town has received and we're spending on behalf of the town. It's also information that I think goes very well in one of our regular meetings. And to that extent, I would now like to move on to proposed town goals. On the town goals, gotta find where I put this right here. Here we are. I wanted to just reiterate something as we get started on this. I see it two parts. The first is that there are goals for the town, which are things that we as a town in the broad sense and through the leadership of the select board are using as pointers to where we believe the town should go. They're points of conversation with people who elect us. It's an opportunity. If we're heading in the wrong direction, I surely hope that residents will step up and say, why are you doing that crazy thing? And I've oftentimes said that if we're not doing what the residents want, for Pete's sakes, don't vote for me. But this is a way of helping the town sort of see we are looking further forward and we're going a long way. These represent goals that may, as downtown revitalization is a perfect example, are multi-year things that will continue to evolve and so on and so forth. But they kind of, what are you going to focus on all the landscape that's out there? We do a lot of things, and it's not saying other things aren't important, but we want a few things that we really say are important to make progress on in the coming year. And that's the idea of town goals. The other piece is, and I had a conversation with Kevin about this, there are town administrator goals, and we are going to do those after we have kind of done the town goals. I've asked Kevin to come up with his list of what he's going to suggest should be his goals as a place to start. All of us are going to weigh in, and we're going to have another conversation on that. So in my view, and again, this is just my view, things like performance management and financial forecasting, in my view, fall more under the heading of town administrator goals, because the town administrator needs to lead on those. The town administrator is responsible for performance management, and actually, in many respects, the things on page 2, in my view, should be on the targets and goals and performance list, if you will, for the town administrator, discussing them in terms of priorities. But I just want to make clear that I see 2 separate lists, both of which are important, but at rather different scales. One is for an individual, and our job in coaching and supporting and helping him, in this case, go in the direction that we believe serves the town. The other is a more broad town thing. And as the case is with downtown revitalizations, we're actually appointing a selectmen's committee to engage many people outside the board and the town administrator on that. So that's kind of the, we went through, when you were just doing the, what are the different sort of budget review levels that we talked about. This is kind of the same sort of, I'm forgetting the word I want, but it's the, it's how we organize our thinking, and I can't remember the word I'm looking for. But anyway, that said, all these things have been put out. You have the document in front of you, and my own feeling is that we need to have some discussion about these. I don't think that they don't need to be designed and refined and defined in humongous detail, because for instance, the ECDC is going to have to really help do a lot of that for downtown revitalization. In my view, their charter is a lot of what downtown revitalization is about. Route 1 development, we've not talked about a lot. It's been kind of bubbling in people's minds. Website improvement, internet security, and things like that are broader. Maybe they could be combined and so on and so forth. But I wanted to go around and take turns, each select person talking about sort of what their reaction is to this. There were some things like access, salary structure, and develop recommendation for long-term sustainability. That is just under Route 1 development. It's not a Route 1 development thing. Successfully negotiate town's 5 outstanding union contracts. That, to me, is a TA thing. But I'd like to kind of go around and get reactions from people and see whether we're in general agreement. My sense is there's a burgeoning consensus as these represent everyone's thinking, and I don't think anybody had anything left out. This is meant to be a fairly comprehensive list. So with that, if we can keep it to a few minutes, but Dick, I'd like to start with you and your thoughts on prioritization as well as what should be included in the town goals part of this.
Okay, well, I think one of the things you brought up was the way it's listed here. Number 2 says Route 1 development, and then there's things that are certainly not Route 1 development in that. So I think it needs to be at least at a high level organized a little bit better, so it recognizes what we're after. Yep. If I could talk about Route 1 development, because we have the downtown revitalization, the Route 1 development is certainly a reasonable topic to put down. my suggestion is we don't bite off too much at any one time. Hopefully, and I did hear it in the comment earlier in this meeting, that the economic community development is for the downtown area. And I think that's good, so they don't lose focus. They can expand in the future. We can change the charter for it if there's a need to go out to Route 1. But overall, I would certainly not have Route 1 development as a second high priority goal for the Board of Selectmen. Again, this also touches on the requirements or the inputs from Planning Board and ZBA, but especially the Planning Board. That's their job. So I feel perhaps that the Route 1 development piece should be taken out. The things under that are not Route 1 development make sense. The financial forecasting, I think, is a separate thing. Overall, you can refer to that as a responsibility of the town administrator, but I don't think so. I think this is where we as a board are saying we need to put some priority on finances in the long term, near term, long term, and its effect on the residents, what they would be able to expect in terms of taxes in the future to support what's going on, the kinds of things that we put into a financial forecast, how important the people think they are. They can look at them, they can give us feedback on it. So I think that topic is something that would be a goal of the Board of Selectmen, to essentially get our hands around the future forecasting and direction of finances within the town.
Okay.
Website development, excellent.
I think it's a good point, Dick. And so I've got you down as financial forecasting, even though it's on page 2, and I put that into maybe a TA thing. You see that as a town goal. You're saying okay with downtown revitalization, but you're not sure about Route 1, correct?
Right.
Okay. Thank you. I'd like to move on. Marshall.
Yeah, well, I would, I guess I'll start with Route 1 because I would fundamentally disagree that shouldn't be on there. It's amongst the top priorities that I have. The very fact that we have just appointed and created this ECDC to primarily focus on the downtown, and the fact that a year ago as a town we hired Kevin to focus on a lot of other things, all of that together creates the bandwidth, to use the word the kids like to use these days, for some of us to focus on other things. And for me, I think just letting Route 1 sit by while, things happen in downtown leaves us open to perhaps not being involved should somebody else want to step in and develop something. And it is ripe for development. It is, I think, we have businesses there that are vacated. We have office parks that are half empty. We have zoning that applies throughout the town when it really should be perhaps different for on Route 1 than it is in downtown. And there's a lot of legwork and research and kind of preparing ourselves for taking on Route 1 development that we can do now with an eye toward doing that in the near future to middle length future. So I definitively think it should be part of what we do at this point. And the other thing that I'm particularly strongly feeling about is it's here website development, but I would take it even higher level than that. Communication. I think the website is a vital part of that. But I think I'm pretty clear on record as saying I don't think we do as good a job as communicating both what we are doing, what we want to do, what we can do as a town as we could be. And so I'd like to look at ways in which we can be better at letting the rest of the community know what we're doing, what we want to do, how they may be involved, all of that, just be more proactively communicative.
So you would like to see the website piece expanded to a somewhat more generalized overall communication focus, trying to improve our communication with those in town and out of town.
Indeed. And the website's vital to that, but I think it's bigger than just a website.
Okay, I hear you on that clearly. Thank you very much on that. Boyd.
I don't know who wrote the September 24th version of our town goals. I'm terribly disappointed in it, and I would not vote to approve it at this point in time. Some of the points of
the menu we're choosing from. This is not a document we're seeking to approve. This is a menu. What I'm trying to do is get a sense, and the next step, once we have this, it's not an extensive conversation, is to put together a draft of what that might be. But I just want to emphasize this is a menu to choose from, and we recognize some things are in the wrong places. So I wouldn't put too much weight on what you see in front of you now.
Well, I would like to go back to the original that we had dated 9/8, because I thought that was fairly well put together. I thought that there were a number of items that were important, some that were not important, but we were asked to provide 4 or 5 of our priorities off of that list, and we did that, and it came back looking totally different.
So
and there were, and Dick brought up this business about ATM development and rationale and gaining approval of ATM to hire economic development director, and that's listed under Route 1 development. And it makes no sense that those things got all jumbled together. Whereas in the original document, they were laid out separately, and we could actually chew on those things separately.
So, Boyd, may I ask if you're looking at the 4.8 document, what on the 4.8 document do you see as the priorities, whether or not they're on this document or expressed in a way that makes sense to you? What would
I told Debbie that I would vote, and I would approve. Referring to the September 8th document, I would approve item 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6.
And what other? Can you list them, please?
1, 2, 3, 4, and 6.
I don't have that document in front of me. Would you just spell them?
Okay, sure. 1 is downtown revitalization.
Yep.
2 is Route 1 development.
Yep.
3 is Highway, Parks, and Cemetery Department organization.
Yep.
4 is Economic Development Director, and 5 is Internet Security.
Great. Thank you very much. That's what we wanted, and I appreciate that. As we put together, I'll work with Kevin on this to try and come up with a draft document. I'll make sure that those are included, and no problem that they come from a previous version. Lynn.
I've got an additional comment, if I may. There's some things that exist on the 9/8 document that, in my opinion, have no business being there. I don't think the Board of Selectmen should be involved in trying to decide what trees ought to come down along the roads in Topsfield. I don't think the Board of Selectmen ought to be involved in worrying about a culvert under the road, because we have people in town that could be told to do that.
Right.
Okay? That's part of their job.
Yeah, no, I would support that. And as I say, the most important thing is I want to get what you do see as should be on there. I noticed so far nobody has brought up looking at the trees as a town goal. That'll probably show up elsewhere, and I see Mr. Wiles sitting there talking on his phone, but you'll get to him, Kevin, you'll get to him, I'm sure. Are you set, Boyd, on that? Can I move on to Lynn? Lynn, I'm moving on to you.
Okay, I had categorized the objectives into 5 priorities. And then underneath that, I listed a number of the things that not necessarily what we're going to be working on, but I think they tie in for Kevin, so that anything that Kevin's working on is rolling up into what we consider to be priorities. I don't think I'm far from what everybody has said. I had enhanced the financial position of the town, and under that was the long-term view that Dick was talking about, to make sure that we can keep the taxes as low as possible. So it's a high-level view on what we're doing to make sure we're heading down the right path and correcting things, because, if they need to be corrected or change them, because some things take years to actually implement. So we have to start looking at it now. And taxes are so important, everybody. I wanted to go just beyond the Route 1 development, which actually was in that That's one of the bullet points under it, to include this longer term view that Dick talked about. So that was enhance the financial position of the town. The second one, I had put protect town assets. And underneath that, the main one was the internet security. But to the point about the trees, it's like, again, if you're looking at departments rolling up into what our priorities are, if we think there are, issues of power outages or forest fires or problems with emergency access, anything that the department heads are doing would roll up under that to say, we're making sure to protect town assets. The third one was the downtown revitalization. The fourth one was to improve the effectiveness of town operations. There are a number of big ticket items that, again, we wouldn't specifically be working on, but Kevin would be. The whole look at HR and the report that came out and changes that need to be made. Assessing the salary structure, things that might take many years to implement that he would be working on, not us, but it would be a priority for the board that those things move forward. And then the last one was the improved communication with residents. To Marshall's point, I think it's bigger than the website. So I had the website improvement and then create and implement new ways for disseminating information, both proactively and upon request. So those were my 5.
Thank you, Lynn. I appreciate that greatly. For mine, the top 2 are downtown revitalization and Route 1. I see them as linked. We've had early conversations occasionally with people who are starting to awaken to the fact that Topsfield is waking up. And there have been at least a couple conversations, for instance, very casual ones, nothing happening but at the moment, but for instance, on restaurant. And those folks like to know that maybe there'd be a spot on Route 1 if it didn't work out where they wanted to be downtown. And the reality is that while I think they're linked, they're not the same. And I think the kind of focus that we want to have on each is a little bit different. Speaking to Marshall's point, I see the Route 1 development is really sort of figuring out what we would or would not want to do. For example, there might be questions about changes in zoning or signage and so on and so forth. Those are not things that are going to be big targets for downtown. There may be a little bit of that, but it's a little bit different focus. And I personally would recommend a separate, if we were going to do, and I'm not recommending we do necessarily, but if we adopt this as a goal, possibly considering a separate committee to kind of wrestle with those problems, because there's a tremendous amount of opportunity there. I've been a proponent for a long time of potentially allowing a few taller buildings in places that don't put them in the eyesight of residential areas and so on and so forth, but would increase taxes, increase floor area, and allow bigger, more stable clients to come join us here. So those are my first and second. I would take website improvement and internet security. In some senses, they both have to do with the technology of the town. The internet security, I'll be honest, I could take it as a goal, but if not, the reality is that ball is rolling. We're learning a lot. It's going to come through the selectmen anyway. We will not spend any town money on internet security without having lots of discussion about that. And that almost, in my mind, is rising to the level of a of an operational requirement. So I think that'll evolve. The one I would put in there is school funding. I feel pretty clearly when it comes, and I'm speaking, Lynn, to your question about taxes and so on, which we all care about. I've been concerned for a long time, and I know I'm not the only one, Dick. I know you're very much on board with this, that schools, it's a real issue, and how we do things. I had conversations with Scott Morrison saying, it's not an assumption I will accept that the way we're doing things is the best possible way. It's probably suboptimal, but pretty darn good, but it could be better. And as we face, looking forward, new models of education, or being forced into one right now with remote learning, for instance, they will be different requirements, different opportunities, and potentially different ways of saving money. Give you one huge example. the big issue of doing hybrid model they're talking about right now. This is a gross oversimplification, but that might be unaffordable just due to the cost of buses alone. If you follow the state mandates, if you can only put 25 kids on a bus, buses at $61,000 a piece, and you're going to need 8 more. I don't see the town. It's not apparent to me how we get another $500,000 to just put another 8 buses out so we can do a hybrid model. We got to think this whole thing through a little differently. I don't think it's a one-year thing. I think the budgeting process needs to be looked at, and the whole set of assumptions of how Topsfield is going to approach maintaining the high-quality education that it has at costs that are affordable for the town with the demographics we have. So I would put school funding number 3.
John, would you continue to talk about that? Because that was one that I had a hard time trying to understand what was really happening. It said budgets are not the only reason for overrides and the reason for why our taxes go up. So how are you seeing the budget being presented differently? For example, were you thinking that the teachers' benefits would be separate instead of being part of the town budget overall, that we would break out the town employees that are at town hall, so to speak, of the departments, and schools as separate, as other towns have done? Is that the sort of thing you were talking about, to show more where the school spends its money or doesn't?
Yeah, I think there's some tactical adjustments that can be made and considered and so on. I think very definitely there's a way of doing that. We talk a lot about if we could share resources. We have one HVAC guy that does all 3 schools. There are things like that. To me, those are tactical. They have to be paid attention to, and by and large, they offer relatively short-term opportunities for improvement. I do think we need to start developing a strategic framework. We will not be, in my view, teaching in 10 years anything the way we teach today. It's just not going to happen. For instance, we spend umpty-ump dollars on books. Do we need the same book budget? Do we need things like that? Are there going to be strategies that are going to take whole categories? Another example, this is kind of, because I know Masco, I'm going to use
John, I have the example, but it says to reframe the way the school budget is presented.
That's one piece.
I'm differently if we didn't have books, but we had computers.
Yeah, when I say school budget, school funding, I'm looking, the problem is the cost. The reality is we're going to change the way we do education. I think to change funding in the long term and try to realize benefits, we not only have to get some of the tactical things, we've got to recognize trends that are out there, be much more future thinkers, and have the town lead working with the school committee to find ways to think out of the box on how we can save specific money. So I use books as one example. And I don't know that books are going to go away entirely. For instance, another thing is if we end up, and I don't know we're going to, but if we end up in a situation where social distancing is going to kind of have to be baked into how we do education, all the way we do science labs right now is going to change. Language labs might change. There are certain activities that are done in small groups and so on. How is this going to be done? Will there be required some reinvestment in how we engage students in different learning modes and so on? I think overall, the education issue, Scott needs to drive the philosophy and design. We need to be pushing on the backside saying, let's pay attention to the costs of doing this. I think we can save some money and end up doing a better job. Let's be sure we don't just focus on a better job without paying attention to how much it costs. And I think the selectmen should take that strategic view. Kevin, you want to say something?
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, I'm sorry if I could interrupt real quick. Some of that language that you're asking about came from me. And admittedly, I've not been through a budget process, so it may just be that it's unavoidable the way it comes out. But as an outsider, these last couple years before this last one, when there were overrides and talk about school, the very kind of basic way I think a lot of people perceived it was everything else in town is fine. That's all good. Don't worry about it. It's the schools that are making your taxes go up.
Yeah.
And that is kind of the public perception, like police, fire, everything else, they're good. Don't worry about them. the reason your taxes are going up is because the schools want so much money. And maybe there's just a reality that the school budget is obviously by far the largest, but I am wondering, and maybe it's more a question than an actual, goal. Is that a realistic way that it's being perceived? Is that a realistic way to present it? Is there a different way to put it out there so it doesn't create this kind of divisive thing where it's, well, if you're either pro-school or anti-school and it all has to do with your taxes? Because that's the way the last couple years before this past one, where there was no override, was basically perceived by a lot of people.
Marshall, I would agree with you on that. And I think that goes to the communication, because you all should know by now, I'm a big picture thinker. That's just the way my brain works. It's like, how can we adjust the system to work better without leading to disadvantages we can't tolerate or don't want to tolerate? How can we improve the optimization of the system? And I think communication is a big part of what you talk about. If we don't start this conversation now, we will be in reactive mode eternally. And that's why I think it's an opportunity for us to begin to look at how we could do this. And frankly, I would like to have the town co-lead with the school committee on how we're going to support the economic realities of the educational directions that they will feel we need to go. And we need to have that as a joint effort, not us being in a reactive mode. That's why I feel schools are the most important piece of the budget if you count by total size. Let's start with elementary, because we got a close, tight relationship there and a direct funding relationship. We'll work on Masco.
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Yes.
I was just going to say, it's not uncommon at all that there's that rub between schools and municipal side. It's not uncommon at all. The approach that I believe is, and the groundwork that we're trying to do, is build the trust in the relationships with the schools so that right up front expectations can be set and conversations can be had around budgeting, right? So when they submit a budget, to your point, Mr. Hook, there was a lot of sort of ahs and gasps when the 25% increase on the budget hit last year. And then it was quite some work to pare that down and get that balanced, but we did. One of my hopes is, and this is my goal, right? Maybe this is something I can put to papers for you folks, is working more closely on the budget for the schools. Now, they need to let me into the room and have a seat at the table, but we've built some really goodwill with them over the last year, whether it's with the COVID and our response to it, helping them support with some of the needs that they've had. We talked about the busing schedule, for example, for the hybrid model. And, I looked at it and I said to their finance director, I said, did you think about this? And, it became apparent that the number that's there that's a really worst case. That's if we go full 100% back to school, not the hybrid model. And that's impossible because our current 6-foot guidelines prohibit us from going anything greater than a hybrid. So, it's a very conservative number that we should be aware of. But I think that, those types of conversations where we can look at each other and say, what are your priorities? Last year they were going for a grant director, for example. And I, to the chairman's point, when I went through the budget with their finance director, they referenced that. And I said, well, what if we tapped into that resource and shared it? If we can maybe get behind it, if there's some opportunity to share that resource potentially, just from a high level. And, the old sort of mentality is separation, right? Schools do schools, town does town. But it full circle. It's always going to come back to trust and building relationships with the people, because it's always about the people. And we're going to continue to do that, whether it's a very specific prescriptive goal or not. I think that's the right thing to do. And that's something I'll be working on quite a bit and continue to.
What I would like to do is just close out my comment with something very, very short and say that I feel really strongly town goals should have a strong vision component. And the necessary, the reality of visioning is you don't know everything going in. I think the work that's been started on the downtown revitalization is an excellent example of how we say we got to do something. And then by declaring that, then you start moving in the direction and refining and choosing and making choices. What I would like to do is take this, I've recorded all of it right here. I'd like to put it together in a summarized form. My own sense is this is all going to fit. I don't think anybody's going to have anything that drops off, but I'd like to try and put it together, see whether we can make a short one-pager, and we'll take another pass at this at another meeting. I think if we can do this, have something short and sweet, we put up for the town and says, this is where we think we're going. This is the binoculars. This is the horizon view we're looking at. And then when we get to Kevin, we're going to be looking at, sort of instead of the 30,000 foot view, we're going to be looking at the 3,000 foot view and down. And that's when I think we'll be making decisions about how we want to roll in support for these meetings. But that's going to be in some senses most important because that'll be the things we see day to day. Kevin.
Mr. Chairman, I've been taking some notes, and just as I've looked through the material that's come in as well, if I could just share maybe a couple of quick thoughts on the conversation and maybe how we can categorize some of these items.
Can we do that as a proposal? Well, if you take just a couple minutes, because I want to move
just a minute.
By 6.
Yep. It's economic development. That covers the downtown revitalization, covers Route 1, it covers a master plan, it covers affordable housing, it covers a lot of different things we can discuss. So that's sort of one of those categories. Communication, that's the website, social media, open houses, those things that we can get information out to people, broadening our public, the Boxford Cable and what they're producing for us. IT improvements, that's the fiber, that's security. Enhancing the financials, which was a very good one. That's the forecasting, that's creating long-term, short-term goals, and then improve the organizational operations. That's the HR report, reorganization of the parks and cemetery, things of that nature. So, just kind of listening to everybody, just kind of one person. Obviously, we're a team, and just listening to everything and reading through it. Those are some of those buckets I thought might be helpful to kind of think about as you reflect on the conversation as well.
Yep.
And if I can be helpful in any way too, Chairman, in helping organize some of these thoughts, just let me know when appropriate.
Yeah, I want to be clear that I think this should be a relatively inclusive list. What I find very encouraging is we don't have each person naming 2, 3, or 4 things, and the sum total spans 15. I think we can find a way to wrap this and make some choices. So with that, your permission, I would like to move on so we can maybe finish up by 6 o'clock. And this will be continuing discussion. I do want to emphasize, once we have our town goals, I'll be working with Kevin and Debbie to find a time when we can schedule a similar process, but probably a much more important one in the next year of how we support Kevin with goals going forward. That's going to be a key piece. I don't think we've had a luxury of doing that effectively in the past, and this year we're going to. So thank you. So executive session. By a roll call vote, the board will enter into closed executive session in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, under exemption number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. The board will not return to open session. I do so declare, and we will take a...
And the purpose of it is to...
This is of the Reserve Police Department negotiations, an update.
Second.
I'd like a motion to go into executive session.
Oh, did you just read it, John?
Oh, I did, to move that week. Yes, I'm sorry. That is a second.
And I seconded it.
Second, I'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Gant?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Bermudez?
Aye.
Mr. Hook?
Aye.
Mr. Spencer? Aye. Passes unanimously. We are now in executive session. Catherine, thank you for joining us. Chief Hovey, thank you for joining us. I'm not sure